Welcome everybody back to our not so regular video interview day. It's not a Sunday, no, but I think we still have a very nice guy for you here because he has a long discography. It's been releasing for music for more than 30 years, and there is always something to talk about. So I'm very happy to have Rob Fish here from 108, and I will try to say this only once because I know it will break my tongue, Rasa Raja Daza.
Hey, pretty good.
Okay, thank you. We will of course also be talking about the Krishna background, but first of all, the question that we always ask: any band, shirt, merch, stuff that you want to pluck right now?
I guess not off the top of my head. I will say I don't wear a lot of band merch at this point in my life, but a few weeks ago I went out and saw the Mets and Gouge Away play, and I gotta say, like, Gouge Away, for those of you that haven't spent any time listening to them, I definitely recommend it. Always liked them on record, but live it was even better, and it was funny. I've always kind of enjoyed Mets. Had never seen them live, but they were also really good. So I guess that's the plug I'll give is check out the new Gouge Away record on Death Wish. It's a phenomenal record, and the new Mets record is actually pretty awesome too. Which, again, I didn't listen to it when it came out, but when I saw them play it live, I've downloaded it since, and it's been a fun listen.
And if you want to know a little bit more about that Mets record, I think 7 weeks ago, something like that, one of the guys was here on our channel. So go back to our archives and you can learn a little bit more about the new record. And I have to agree, the record is really good because it is still indie, but it has a very good ear for melody. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The record that we want to talk about today, although it's only a 2-song EP, 7-inch thing, but I think it's really interesting. You have a relatively new band out called Unsufferable.
Correct.
With two guys that are also not, how should I say, not that unknown, because you have your drummer Rob was in, not Rob, what is his name? I forget. Ryan, right?
Ryan's bass player, yes.
And he was in Bludgeon. As we've already mentioned, 108, that is your background, and some other bands. And you also have Dave Bushmeyer, whom we also already had on the show here last year.
Okay.
New Day Rising, that should be the band to drop, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
First of all, I know that the three of you don't live in the same area of Northern America. So how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think even for me, since 1993, I haven't been in a band where everybody lived in the same area. So I've been doing kind of like these remote bands for forever. But essentially, we've all kind of played together and met over the years. And so, had connections on Facebook, things like that. And, I think if I remember correctly, at some point, Dave had, put a clip of like a riff that he had written, and I kind of responded to it, and he hit me up and was like, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a record or doing a band together, just doing something?" And I definitely was. I mean, what's interesting is over the years I've been really lucky in that I've had a lot of people who are like great creative, like energy people, people that put out lots of great records, kind of approach me and try to, do like little projects together. And, I think the thing with me is I'm not like this writer guy, right? Like if something inspires me, then I'll write something. And, otherwise, like, I'm pretty quiet in that perspective. So a lot of times, someone will send me something and I'll be like, "Hey, that's amazing." But nothing really clicks in terms of like, "Oh, here's what I would want to do with this," or here's how I think I can take this already really cool thing and maybe make it better, or at least complement it. And so usually I just end up not doing any of the records, and it's not because I don't love the songs or things like that. It's just that, for me, something doesn't click in terms of like, all right, this is what I want to express at this time and whatever. So when he sent me the songs, I wasn't sure if anything would really come of it, but there were two songs in particular that like right away I was like, okay, in my head, I knew what the song was. I knew what I wanted to try to do with it. And so that's kind of how things started. And, after, I think one of the songs, we recorded a rough demo for it. And that's when, Dave looped in Ryan, and we went from there and ended up doing the two songs and releasing it, I think in January it came out, and the final just recently came out.
And so basically you all recorded your own parts separately,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So you recorded in California, wasn't it?
So I actually live in Arizona now. So yeah, David is in Montreal in Canada, where he's a student, and so he recorded the guitar and bass guitar and drums there, which he then sent to me and in Arizona, and I recorded the vocal tracks for it, and then we sent it over to Ryan, who lives in North Carolina. So it's almost like a triangle of North America. So yeah, none of us live in any proximity to each other, but just sent it around that way, and then got it mixed, and ended up connecting with Iodine Records, and that was it.
I know that you are planning to do a full EP, not full EP, full LP. Would you also then do the same recording process, or would you then rather get together and record?
I think we're still we still have to think through that. I mean, Dave has sent over, I think 10 songs for me to look at.
Yeah, he's a workaholic.
What's that?
He's a workaholic.
Yeah. And they're great songs. I think I'm trying to figure out what they are for me, and like it's a thing for me where I really want to make sure that I can do something to either complement or improve the song. And if I can't, then I don't know what to do with it. So we're still kind of working to do that. But I think, look, ideally for me, we would record all of the bass stuff separately like we did this time, but maybe get together at the end, to do any final revisions and, mix it together. I think it would be great for us to be able to sit in a room and kind of work on that together, put the finishing touches on it. Because again, like money and time are a tough thing right now. David's a full-time student, Ryan's a full-time teacher. I've got a full-time job. We all, Ryan's got a young family, or somewhat younger family. So, it's a lot to figure out, but I think it would be kind of fun to be able to do it that way. But we'll see as things kind of progress.
Also interesting to listen to both tracks, Enemy of the State and also Revisionist. They sound very well produced, and they are still able to catch that kind of early metallic hardcore or metalcore vibe from the late 90s, early zeros. Is that also something where you say like, okay, that is where I as a vocalist fit in best?
I mean, look, I do not have the most like my voice is my voice, and it's pretty limited. And again, that's where if I feel like I can't improve something or do something with it, I'd rather not. And it's funny, like I haven't listened to primarily heavy music like I play since maybe 1991.
Wow.
Like since then, I primarily listened to very different music. I think the common thread to everything I listen to is there's definitely is like a social and political kind of bend to the vast majority of things I listen to. But it's funny, I don't listen to as much heavy music as I actually end up recording on. And I think part of that is that even for me, like just the way that I express myself tends to be more in that vein. So it's just more natural that I record music in that vein. And again, I always love heavy music and listen to a fair amount of it, but it's definitely not the majority of what I listen to. So, again, I think, musically, I mean, if you sent me, this is definitely, I think, where I can kind of lend some I don't know, I could add to the song and I can complement the song. Whereas if you send me a rock and roll song, like I might think it's great, but I don't know that I can do much to it that I'm going to feel like added anything to it.
We should also, what should I say? I mean, like, I don't want to say that it's like a typical Rob Fish vocal. There is not a typical Rob Fish vocal style, but there is something that one can say about all your bands. And that is, on the one hand, of course, a social conscience, and on the other, there is urgency. And that is something that I really always liked about those bands of yours that I know, and also those that I just listened to a few weeks back when I was preparing for this. Urgency, is that something where you said, like, okay, you have spoken about complementing to a track, speaking about things. Is that something where you see yourself like, okay, the music can be as good as it gets, but there needs to be a certain kind of message?
Not as much about the message, but I think the urgency and the feeling has to be there. It kind of goes back to what I said earlier, right? Like I'm not a writer. There are people I know that sing for bands that like they write every day, and like that's what they do. Like that is not me. I'm not an artist in that sense. And so if a song, like I can like a lot of songs, but not necessarily go, this is what that song is saying to me. And if it doesn't bring about like that sense of urgency or that sense of like, I don't know, like it's interesting. I remember like everybody used to talk about, I don't know, people still might, but you know, people used to debate like who is the best singer of Black Flag, right? And I gotta say, like that's a band that I love, you know, the entire catalog, right? But I will say, like I remember the first time seeing the decline of Western civilization, and they had a clip where, you know, Ron Reyes, or Shabo they call him at the time, you know, was singing Black Flag songs. And when I hear him sing those songs, there is a sense of like desperation and urgency that you hear in his voice that I've always connected to. And I think that that is a big thing for me with any kind of music at this point. Like it doesn't matter what the genre is, if I can hear a sense of like urgency, desperation, heartbreak, love, like these kind of primal things, like that's what will draw me in. And it could be a genre of music that I don't, you know, relate to in most senses, but if I hear that, like I might not love it, I might not listen to it all the time, but I get attracted to it. And so I think that that translates into, you know, the songs that I end up doing or not doing, is that if I can't find that within myself, that kind of energy and urgency to express something using that song as a medium, no matter how great the riffs are, or how great the structure is, or whatever it is, like I can't do it. Like I'm not adaptable like that. So, you know, I think if you listen to a lot of my bands musically, there's definitely some common threads, but I don't think they sound so much like each other. But I tend to, for the most part, sound like me, because my voice is my voice. Like it's a pretty limited instrument. The fact
you
that
cannot tune it, right?
Yeah, the fact that I've been able to put out 20 something records blows my mind, because I've always been the least talented person in every band I've been in. But I think what I can bring to it, if I find it, is that sense of like urgency, that sense of like, you know, of like this being an emotional outlet. And that's what it is for me. So when things are really, really good in my life, and you know, personally, but also my surroundings, things are, you know, maybe not ideal, but they're not, you know, that's when I don't write songs. But it's in these moments where something, whether it's in my personal life or in the world around me, where things are happening that, you know, maybe that elicits some type of urgency, that's when I can write a song.
So then let's talk about the two tracks, and let's start talking about Enemy of the State. If I understand it correctly, it's a song about, or if I understand it correctly, I would say it's a song that is based on the Supreme Court basically saying that each state can accept or deny Wade versus Roe, right? Like abortion rights, and deny those abortion rights. But you in that song go a little step beyond. you seem to be talking about more than just denying those rights, which in itself is a horrible thing. But I
Yeah.
think you want to talk about even more, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think, it's, to me, I think you framed it exactly right. The initial inspiration around it was around that Supreme Court ruling and the impact it has on, you know, people's ability to make decisions about their own body. And it's a funny thing. I think people, that know me as, from the guy from 108, things like that, like that's always been something that I think that they struggle to wrap their heads around, is that, I'm a vegan, right? I have all these beliefs in minimizing violence and in the sanctity of life. But things are not black and white, and they're not simple. And so I've always been someone that felt strongly that, like, whether I agree with something or not, or whether that doesn't, none of that matters, right? Like every individual has a right to make decisions about who they love, right? Who they associate with, and what they can do and should do with their body, and how they identify as a person, as a human. And I believe that those are rights that you just, I don't care what you believe in, like it's not up, and it's a funny thing, like I'll see sometimes people post things like, well, men should be making these decisions, women should be making these decisions. And I'll go further to say women should not be making the decisions for other women. Individuals should be making the decision for the individual. And so, yeah, the initial song was kind of inspired by that, but some of the point I'm trying to make there is that you might not be, a female. So you might look at this decision and this dynamic and go, well, I don't agree with it, or I can agree with it, I don't agree with whatever it is, right? But you might say, but ultimately it doesn't really impact me, right? I'm not in that situation. I don't have to worry about being in that situation, right? And my point is that if you think that this is just about this one thing about should a woman have a right to choose, like you're off here. Like this is step number one. And all these different things of progress have been made. I run a company in the US, and I put together a message to my team for Pride Month. And the idea was to say, first, understand what the root is, right? That in 1969, right, these brown and black, trans women, stood up for, police, stood up against police violence and oppression. And that it really was this like radical movement. And now it's more about, it's turned into something different, and it's great that it has, right? You want it to continue, but it's that idea that, like, these moments come, and I think a lot of times we think that you make progress, and let's say you're going up, and that it never goes back down, and you never risk those freedoms again. And my point, I think, was that leading up to this whole moment was a lot of things about, hey, like, the people that were adding to the Supreme Court, the things that we're not doing it to reverse these things. We'd never do that. We don't, that's a precedent. It's not going to, and then what happens when the chance is there, right? So it's that idea that, like, they're picking your rights off one by one. It's easy to feel free until you're the one, right? Because we're all going to have those moments. And we can choose to say, and look, like there's 1,000,001 things going on in the world that are fucking crazy, right? And there, you can't be, people, if this is their cause, they look at this and go, well, if you're not, this isn't, if you're not throwing everything behind this, then you don't really mean it. And then someone has another cause, and they look at it, and and they have this belief that everybody should have this same, passionate response and same, demand for change on this one subject. And the reality is there's 1,000,001 different things happening right now that are an assault to our ability to be free, to love who we love, to have control over our body, over our destinies, over our identities. And so while this one thing might not impact you, realize that these other things do. And when they take away the rights here, they'll move on to the next thing.
Yes. And something that also a lot of people forget is that if we only look at this Supreme Court decision, then it's just one decision. Yes, but
Yeah.
At the same time, you should also see it as one part that has already started before, where certain states in the US and also in other countries took away the freedom of speech indirectly by implementing some sort of censorship. And that is something that a lot
Yeah,
of
I mean,
people
I
forget.
kind of liken it to like your health, right? Like, you know, a heart attack will kill you or can kill you, right? But there's usually a lot of little things
Before.
that happen that if you see them and you recognize them, you realize it is leading up to this heart attack.
Yeah.
Everything's gonna be right. So at first, it seems like a small thing. Your cholesterol's really high. Oh, not, you know, is that a big deal? Or my blood pressure's really high, and you don't connect that these small little things when they come together lead to this monumental thing. And I think that to me is how I kind of look at all these little, you know, seemingly little things happening that when you put them, when you look at them together, you know, in context to one another, it's chilling. And there's reason to be scared, concerned, angry, everything, every emotion you can think of.
To make, by the way, that just struck me, to make it clear for everybody, when you talk about women shouldn't be making this decision for women, I think you are at that point where I'm also at. It's not something, it's the decision is the only thing that should be involved with the government, and the government should make it possible that women can decide for themselves.
Yeah, and I think what I'm
Everything
saying here is
else,
the idea that if you bring 10 women together and 6 of them say, yes, I think, you know, I think abortion should be illegal, I still say that's bullshit.
yeah, because
Those 10
you,
women should be able to make individual decisions on
yeah,
that subject, not, you know. And
the
again, like,
the only,
you
the
know,
only thing where those 10 women are important, if those are 10 women who have a say in, is this possible, yes or no?
yeah,
And then everything, it's not even a question. Those 10 women just basically just saying, okay, we grant this decision to you and you decide for yourself.
exactly. Yep.
Nevertheless, of course, when we talk about enemy of the state, would you say that, because I think a lot of people will mistake, but or might mistake the title for you being anti-Trump and anti-the Republicans, I'm very sure you would not put the blame on one individual person, right?
No, no, and you know, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I look at America and I look at the population, and I regularly sit there and go, how is it that for all the smart, you know, incredibly talented people we have,
Yeah.
the choice I have is Biden or Trump?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it really is the choice. Like, and I think when you just look at how politics work, like, if
In
you're,
America.
yeah, if you're a, you know, a smart, empathetic, you know, leader who believes that governing should be, you know, in the best interest of the whole, not select individuals based on money or you know, these different demographics. Why would you enter politics, right? Like, because it's such a vicious world. But you know, it is a sad thing, and to me, again, like, it's not about a fucking political party. Like, when you put, it doesn't matter what the cause is.
Mhm.
Right? When humans are involved, you know, aspects will creep in of greed, of lust, of taking advantage of others. Like, so for me, like, I I don't care. This isn't about Trump. It's not about any of this. It's about this. It's about this, the sole idea that, you know, people feel like they have the right to tell other people what they can do with their bodies.
Would
And you know, and then it extends into all these other things about how they identify, you know, who they marry, who they love. And you know, I just, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, people can then take that to an extreme and say, okay, so you're saying that, you know, a 30-year-old man should be able to marry a 10-year-old girl because he, no, like don't, you
no.
know, again,
There
like,
are
don't take it to
borders.
that extreme, like, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the argument that everybody on the right wing side then comes up with, like, oh, so you're supporting anarchy. No, we're supporting human morals to a certain degree, and um
And I
No,
and I think
we're not
it's
talking about Polanski, who married a woman that was 3 or 4 years younger than him, and then they lived together for I don't know how long. So it's not about it's no. There is a difference, and there is even a difference between. I mean, like 10-year-olds. That is not a question, but I don't know how it's about the US, but here in Germany, you are allowed to marry underage with the consent of your parents. After a certain age, I think it's 16. I'm not 100% sure. But there is already the difference between 16, 17, 18, 21.
Yeah.
And nevertheless, to come back to enemy of the state, would you then say that the enemy of the state is a certain ideology, a certain
No,
conservative
I think
thinking?
the enemy of the state are I think the way that the way I ended the song kind of lays it out, right? It's a war on women, it's a war on the poor, it's a war to disenfranchise, right? Like, the thing about feeling helpless is that you stop, at some point you just go, well, I can't change it if it's a fuck it. Like,
Oh yeah.
I'm not gonna get involved. And I think that, that's the thing. Like, I don't look at, the state as being a political party or a set of people. It's this
Yeah.
idea that if you don't fit the molds, you are in some, at some point the enemy. And right now it might be about the women's body. The next it might be about gay marriage. The next is going to be about something else. And it's again, I think it's that idea that we make up the state. And as painful as it might be sometimes, looking at your choices of who you can vote for or can't vote for might be like, you've got to understand that sometimes inaction is as harmful as action, right? Like,
Yeah. I think here the problem of the states come into play, right? In Germany, or also general in Europe, where we are facing election, when we are recording this, election is in 8 days. I think the American problem is the two-party system, that even though you have official other parties, but they simply play no role in politics. In
yeah,
Germany, you have a chance of voting for other parties. And even if you don't like the parties in parliament, you have a chance of voting other parties that are not in parliament and that, in your opinion, do a better cause. You don't have to vote. If you want to support a non-government party in Germany or in Europe, you don't have to vote for the brown assholes. You can still
yeah.
go and vote for something else. I know that in America, a lot of people refrain from voting because they say, and I can understand that, it's the same coin. It's just two different sides.
Yeah, and I think that there is truth to it. But I think if you're a woman or if you're a person that's concerned that a woman might not have a right to choose, then you're kind of forced to vote one way. If you're, if you're in the LGBTQ community or you support them, you're almost put in a position where you have to vote with, you got these one of two choices, right? And so it's a tough thing.
It is.
But and again, like, I'm sure that I know people who have very different political beliefs than I do. And again, and I know people that are, that are, against abortion, if you will, right? So and that's fine. Like, if you're in that situation, you say, you know what, regardless of how this happened, whether I wanted it, didn't want it, whether it was a violent act that made this happen, I'm going to have that child. You have that right to make it, and I support that. But what I don't support is you saying other people have to make that same decision. Just as I am, I've been vegetarian, vegan for 36 years. Like,
Wow.
and I do it for moral reasons, but I don't believe that there should be a law that says everybody has to be vegan.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, it's a choice that I make. It's something that's really, really important to me. It's something that I encourage other people to consider, but I don't equate that to, well, now everybody should be governed to live in that reality. Like, it's just not, doesn't connect to me.
Then we could also talk about your religious belief. because I think it goes in a very similar direction. You have been Krishna for how many years now?
Well, I've been involved to some degree with the Krishna movement for 37 years.
It's a long time.
Something like I could have that wrong. I got to think.
Yeah, even if it's 36 or only 35,
Yeah.
it's a very long time.
Yeah.
When looking at, and here I would like to step back to 108. When looking at the lyrics that you wrote for 108 and the things you put out for 108, one might have recognized some Krishna elements, and that is, here comes my question. You are not a big fan of trying to be a role model, are you? Or let's put it this way, of trying to be a role model and implying that everybody should be the same.
Yeah, I think the thing is that when I like with 108, first off, there were certain things that from day one, Vic and I talked through to say, like, if same thing, like the idea of like a woman's right to choose, our viewpoints on on the LGBT community and their rights. Like those are things that we were talking about in 1992 when we were talking about doing this band. And we both said, like, we understand that maybe most Hare Krishnas they feel very differently than we do on these subjects. Like my point was, this is how I feel. And if that's a problem, then I won't be in the band. Like it's that simple. And I think we all came together saying, yeah, like I think the thing to think about with me and spirituality, and then I'll get back to your to answer that question, is that for me, it's never been about, oh, I found the truth, right? Like this is the equation of this is equal to 1 + 1 = 2, right? It was this idea that, like, look, I was a wounded, insecure kid who felt disconnected from everything. And I was trying to find something that would help me understand why I experienced some of the things I did in my early life, why I felt the way I did. And I connected to a lot of aspects of Gaudiya Vaishnavism and that movement. But there are always things that, I feel like even if you attach yourself to a movement, whether it's animal rights movement, straight edge movement, things like this, whatever, religious movement, like you don't have to sign a thing that says I support and agree with everything. Like I pick and choose what I want. One time someone referred to me as kind of like a cafeteria style Catholic, but in Krishna clothing. And I was like, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. If I agree with something, I embrace it. If I disagree with something, I discard it. If I like something, I embrace it. If I don't like it, I stay away from it. Like that, you're using that as an insult. It's not. So I think that's one thing. But going back to your question about, like, look, I've always known that I'm a deeply flawed individual, that I don't have access to knowledge that you don't have access to. Like I'm not smarter than you. I've always said, if I'm ever the smartest person in the room, we're all in trouble. Right. So like I think that's how I look at myself, is like I am as lost and as wounded as the next person. And I might have found some things that bring me a sense of relief, that bring me a sense of belonging, that bring me a sense of peace. But I've never assigned that to be truth, right? I've never read the Bhagavad Gita and said 5,013 years ago, this exact thing happened. Like it never was that for me. So but going back to your thing, like I don't look at myself as anything other than a flawed human being trying to navigate a crazy and unpredictable world. And anything I put out, like when I was singing songs in 108 about struggling with sexuality and things like that, I wasn't singing it to you. I was talking about myself and the shit that I was going through and the things that I was feeling. And I think that's the thing for me. Like it's always been like this is me trying to express, trying to find my place in this world and my path. And there's I've never felt that I've been privy to answers that other people aren't privy to, or that I have found something, or that I have something in my possession that you don't, that makes me better or more placed to make a decision. Like I've never felt that way, and I don't think I ever will.
Then you would probably also answer the following question with no. Have you found your truth?
I think I have. But I think it comes down to how you define truth, right? If definition of truth is as simple as 1 + 1 = 2,
Yeah.
then no, I'll never find a truth.
Yeah.
What I have found is that like I know who I am as an individual, and I know what I aspire to do with the whatever however many years I have left in my life, and I know what I aspire to leave behind to others, whether it's people that I know in my personal life, whether it's family, whether it's people that I work with. Like I know how I want to be remembered and thought of, and I use that to really try to make sure that I'm treating people and interacting with people and doing things that when all is said and done and I look back, like I'll be proud of and I'll feel good about what I did. I might not feel good about all of it. I'm always going to see mistakes. I'm always going to see flaws. But I'll walk away going, I did the best that I could with what I was capable of. And so that is my truth, right? Is that like I have identified these things in my life that are core pillars to who I am now. And they help drive every decision I make, whether it's in my personal life or my business life. Like they are the common things that kind of drive me forward.
Is that also part of the second track on from Unsufferable, Revisionist? Is that also something like that? Acknowledging your own flaws and seeing, okay, this is where I was wrong, but I was wrong and I can mend it.
It can be. This song was actually in context too, and I don't know how much you've heard about it in Germany, right? But it's this idea of all the hoopla around critical race theory in the U.S. And without getting too much into that, I think Germany, to me, again, I wouldn't say it's perfect by any means, but I think there's a lot to be said about how Germany looks back at its role and the things that it was involved in World War I and World War II, right? And I think it's starkly different to the U.S. in that the U.S. has slavery, right? Let's use that as the example. We do everything we can in our history books to whitewash what happened, to negate the insane amount of suffering that we cause, and still to some degree it reverberates in certain communities. And we wonder why people are still angry. We wonder why people don't prosper. We wonder why people keep talking about it. And I kind of look at, and it's not just in slavery. You can look again, World War II, the internment camps, right, where we took Japanese Americans. And what we did with Native Americans, right? I just got done doing a tour of going to different like national parks throughout the Southwest, and you're going in and out of all these different indigenous communities and now reservations for Native Americans. And when you realize, like when you grow up and you read a history book, all of it is incredibly whitewashed, if not even mentioned. And my whole point is that if you want people to heal, right, if you want people to, and you want people on both an individual and collective societal level to be happy, to come together, then you've got to talk real about how you got to where you are, right?
Yeah, and I think there is something that we should also, to make it clear, Rob has been saying, if you want people to heal, there is a question that is even before that, and the question is, if you want a more civilized and less angry society, then people need to heal.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are things that I've done in my life that I am incredibly embarrassed by. It's up to me to make those amends. Like if I did something to you 30 years ago, right? but I never tried to make amends. You know, again, like there always is you as a victim always have the decision to absolve me of what I've done, or to say, you know what, I'll accept your apology and let's move on, right? Like you always have that right to make that decision, but the onus is on me to try to make that right. And at some point, you know, you may never forgive it, and I gotta kind of move on. But I think what happens, and you'll hear it, like people, I remember like when I wrote this song, it was driven by, I had read this article, and it was like an opinion piece in a newspaper, and the person said, like, I just don't understand, like, why, you know, if you think about like, and this is more around, you know, they're talking about around CRT, and at the time, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, and they were saying, well, you know, these individuals are all in their 30s, right? So slavery was done so much hundreds of years before they were.
We need
And
to
it's like,
forget.
yeah, and it's this idea of like, look, like, how about we acknowledge how horrific it all was, right? What was lost, what was stolen, how those, you know, decisions, and how the aftermath that still plays a role in the structure of our society. Like,
Yeah.
if we're upfront and open about it, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean everybody's going to now get together, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya, right? But we have a better chance of healing, of prospering individually and collectively, and moving past, quote unquote, these horrific things, if we acknowledge them and we do our best to, you know, to do right by those that were wronged.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that we all know that speech by Dr. King.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes I forget that the most important line in there is when he talks about his children. Because for many of us who are now parents or grandparents or young adults, it might be difficult to see that point in time where we are past that, but we should try to make it possible for our children and our
Yeah, and
children's
what's
children.
interesting, even about Martin Luther King, like the way that he's whitewashed, right? Like
Yeah,
they make, like, I mean, it's just it's an interesting thing, and look, I think it happens over time, regardless, right? We do it with bands. You hear people all the time being like, "Oh, back in the '80s, hardcore scenes were so much better." Guys, give me a fucking break. Like, you know, like I might not always relate to the newest bands and their sound and their thing, but they're no less fucking punk rock than I was, than the people that came before me. Like, it's just a bunch of fucking sour bullshit.
yeah,
Right. But you know, the reality is, like, yeah, things are different, but that doesn't mean they're not vitally important and awesome. And they're giving a voice and an opportunity to people
yeah.
who are grabbing it by the horns and running with it. Like,
Yeah, it's that old discussion between Roger Miret and his brother Freddie. You know, like do you have to listen? Do you have to know all the old stuff before you can invent something new? No, not necessarily. You can also start something new from a fresh start, and that fresh start can be as exciting musically and also like lyrically as some of the old stuff. Um, you know,
yeah, but I guess what, you know, going back to the point around Martin Luther King, it's this idea that, like, we've revised who he was. Like that speech was amazing. Have you read any of his other speeches? Like, do you understand his
yeah,
arrest record? Do you understand, like, all these things that, like, we've acted, now we treat like they didn't exist? They did. And even, like, I think, you know, to an extent, like thinking about like someone like Malcolm X, like when you watch his trajectory, you know, from a young adult to, you know, to his death, like that evolution was like vast.
yeah,
And you know, there were things that, you know, that later on in life he looked back at, and you know, from everything I've read, you know, where he would, you know, where he felt that the intent of what he was doing was right, but maybe the way it was
yeah,
expressed or the way he went
yeah,
about it wasn't right.
yeah.
Like, and it's a funny thing. Like, you know, I'm not, that guy, what's his name, Frank Turner, he put out a song a few years ago, and I don't remember what the song was, and I don't even remember exactly the lyric, but it was that idea of going, like, why don't we celebrate people who can look back and go, you know, yeah, I fucked that up. or I used to think this, and now, you know, after time, after hearing from other people, after these experiences, I now believe in this. Like, we should celebrate those people. We should celebrate, you know, like I love when I have a conversation with someone where I go in with a very specific viewpoint and walk away going, maybe I don't, maybe my viewpoint doesn't change. Sometimes it does, but it might just be like, holy shit, that is way more complex. Like, it was interesting, and this is probably sounds stupid, but like, my wife and I just went out for 6 days. We visited all these national parks, and we stopped for 2 days at this animal sanctuary called Best Friends. And it's like 6,000 acres, has horses, dogs, cats, you know, pigs, goats, all these animals. And we went to this horse training, and the woman was describing what it's like how they have to take these horses that were kind of abused or mistreated or come from these horrible situations and retrain them. And she was talking about, like, you know, again, like, horses don't understand English, right? But how they can read body language and tone and even just the look. And like, she would do a certain thing that you wouldn't really notice, and the horse would know, I have to walk this way, or I have to speed up this way, like all these different things. And you just realize, like, holy shit, like, these animals are so complex.
Yeah.
Like, psychologically, how they interact, how they develop individually, how they develop collectively, what happens when a horse is separated from other horses, like, they don't even know how to be a horse. Like, it's all these things that are much more complicated than you think. So I love when I go into something thinking X and I learn that maybe it's actually Y, or maybe it's X and YZ, and all those
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
things. And I
Yeah.
think something really cool and beautiful about that. And, you know,
Yeah,
we
that's
should
something that we
celebrate those
very
things.
often forget, right? We tend to think too much in black and white. That is
Yeah.
something that I always, or not always, but that I very often see. We're too much of black and white beings.
Yeah.
Um, Before we come to the infamous quickfire round here at the end, I still have to ask two questions.
Yeah.
First of all, you are a person who likes to collaborate with others. If I see it correctly, I have not seen a Rob Fish solo track anywhere. And you seem to have also a good knack at selecting people with whom you work. Is that something where you say, like, you rather participate in something than do something alone?
Absolutely. And it's
Musically.
funny, like, even as a band, like, one thing I did express to Dave and Ryan as we kind of start to think about this album was like, look, I don't want this to be like, you're the guitar player, you figure out the guitar parts, you're the bass player, you figure out, you're the singer, you do this. Like, I want to collaborate this together. Like, I want you guys to tell me, like, hey, here's how I hear the vocals, or here's what, you know, like, if you want to contribute lyrics or themes, anything, like, I want this to be, because again, like, on my own, I mean, Jesus Christ, like, what am I gonna offer? Like, I'm not a fucking artist. Like, I don't know, I'm not that, like, and I think the beauty of music is this idea that you have. I mean, that was the thing I think with 108 as an example for me. Like, you know, Vic, Triv, and I were kind of three core people, right? That played in the majority of the records. And I think when you think about the band, like, from a creative standpoint, right? You could throw Kate in there too, Kelly, right? Like, those four people, we're all radically different. Like, no one's gonna hang out with Trivacrom and then hang out with Vic and then hang out with Kelly and then hang out with me and go, oh yeah, they are so much alike. Like, we are all polar opposites to each other. We are extreme, you know, sides of a square, if you will. But we have these things, these areas where our lives kind of intersect, and the way that we perceive the world or we interact with the world intersects. And that's what makes a really cool fucking band.
Yeah.
Like, and so for me, like, that's what I want to be a part of. And I think that at this point, any project I do, like, I did a record with this guy Tom. He's, you know, in this band Hundreds of AU. He used to be in, you know, You and I and a bunch of other great bands. You know, we did an EP together. I think the reason we didn't do anything else together was I couldn't figure out a way to work with him to really, like, really collaborate on songs in a remote, in a remote situation.
You're talking
Um,
about every scar has a story, right?
yeah. So we were able to do a few songs together, but it's like, like, and I don't know, it's weird. Like I actually one day would love to get together with people who live where I live and actually like, even if you never put out a record, just get together once a week in a studio and write songs and do that together. So no, I do really like that's what I want to do, if anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. One collaboration that I saw and that I liked a lot was Eshas with
Yeah.
my friend Aaron Etch.
Yep.
Also one of those people that we interviewed way back. I think that's
him and Dave, like the amount of creative output between those two is just
I mean, like,
I
he just put out another one yesterday where he
yeah,
covers Jawbreaker.
yep.
Uh, and I still wish him all the best in moving here to Europe. So, Aaron, when you see this, get your ass together, come over here, get the money. But out of all those projects that you've done by now, there are, of course, a few where I'm pretty sure there will never be another thing. But let's have a look at 108, Judas Factor, and maybe Eshas. Do you think that we will ever get music by any of those three outlets again?
The Judas Factor, no. I'll say that the Ballads in Blue China record is probably the most dear record I've ever made to me, because of how it helped close a pretty horrific chapter in my life and led me to go on to other things. It's a record that like I can't
25 years now.
What's that?
That's 25 years now. Ballads.
Yeah. It's a record that I love. I could never play that record again. Like those songs, like I did a podcast a few months ago, Where It Went podcast. It does like the whole Revelation Records catalog. And so they did an interview, and I remember the night before I had to listen. I sat down to like listen to that record just to like get in the mindset to talk about it, and like I cried multiple times, because of the memories and the feelings and the trauma that it brought back. So I could never revisit that. Me and Aaron, Eshas, that was the name of that project. He's one that he sends me stuff all the time that I love, but I ultimately never do anything with, because I'm just like, I don't know what to do with it that's gonna make it better than what it is, or I'm just not in a state where like I'm inspired to write or do anything. 108 would always be an interesting one for me. I could see at some point something potentially, like, I think, when we first got back together, that was one of the caveats that I put out there, was that I didn't want us to play unless we were going to continue to create new music. And so we did that. We did a new beat from A Dead Heart. We did 1861. But then, Vic moved to Japan, and we went from being a band with two people in Boston, me in Arizona, me in Portland, Oregon, him in San Diego, to now it's Japan, Gainesville, Florida. Like it's so hard, and our lives are all in different places. So I'd say that there's a possibility one day that we could do something, but there's a possibility we'll never be in a room again together ever again. Like, who knows? And we try not to worry about that at this point. Like, if something happens, cool. If it doesn't, cool. But like, it's not,
Yeah,
a lot of things,
we should
a
also
lot
not
of
forget
stars have to align for that to work.
Yeah, and something that we should also not forget is that, just like you said, all the stars have to align. There is a reason for sometimes impossible situations to come together, and at the same time,
sometimes they just die a natural death, and that's okay too. Like, and I think that's kind of where I've gotten to with everything I do, which is like, I'm not going to worry about like, things don't need a fucking plan. Like, sometimes you do it because it sounds fun and you want to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that is the nice thing for me in anything I do now, which is like I know I don't have to do anything. There's no pressure, and if I don't feel it, if I'm not inspired to do it, then I won't do it, and that's okay.
Yeah, and it's like you have to live in the present, right? I think that is
Yeah,
something that a lot of people forget, because you don't get another present. Oh,
yeah,
you don't get another past, but if you live in the present, you have a lot of possible futures.
yep.
So first of all, Rob, thanks for all of that. Nevertheless, nobody leaves the Veil of Sound interview without having to go through the infamous quickfire round.
Okay.
My goodness, I've now said that I think 107 times, 170 times by now. Nevertheless, to explain what it means to you, you will get two alternatives and you have to choose one or the other and give, if necessary, a short explanation.
Okay.
As you've been to so many national parks in the last couple of days, let's go with something easy. Zion or Bryce National Park?
I'd say I loved Bryce. My visit this time around to Bryce was better than Zion, but I had lost my wallet when we went to Zion, so we had to go back.
Okay.
And we decided to go on a bus tour that just brings you to all the different stops in the park. And what we realized was that we probably need to go back there for a few days and really kind of experience it more. So on this trip, Bryce hands down. But I feel like Zion, we touched the surface, but we didn't really get into we didn't get to experience it to the length that you need to invest in it in time and such to really understand it. So I'll go with Bryce for now, but Zion is the one that we'll probably go back to.
Of course, if I have somebody here who has been in the thick of a fin, and for me, one of the most important scenes when I grew up was New York hardcore. So I have to ask you a few questions about that.
Okay.
Biscuits versus youth of today. Which one would you rather listen to right now?
Gorilla Biscuits.
Bolt versus burn.
Burn. I have to think about that one. I liked Bolt. I liked Bolt, but burn, I mean, there's just certain bands in a certain moments that it's just hard to like seeing them when they came out. Even more than that, man. Fucking the band that I feel like if they put out it never translated on record to what it was live. Absolution. I saw Absolution's first show. It was their first show, Raw Deal's first show. I think Crackdown also played in Sick of It All, if I remember it right. And Absolution opened the show. And you would have thought that they were the fucking headliners. Like Gingy walked up on stage like it was his show, and you were there to be able to witness it. And it was one of the
You were allowed to witness it, I guess.
Yes, it was one of the most, like, to this day, I reference that, watching that going, like the awe that I was in was just unreal. But I would say burn or bold, burn. Absolutely.
Interesting that you mentioned that moment of like an opening act taking over the stage, because it fits very well to my next question, which revolves around somebody going from New York to Los Angeles. I had that particular moment in 1992 when I saw the opening act, back then opening for Suicidal Tendencies. And there was a young Mexicano, Chicano guy up front, upstage, screaming his lungs out. And it was Zach de la Roca. So question, which record or which band of Zach's would you rather listen to right now? Inside Out or Rage Against the Machine?
Rage Against the Machine.
Oh, I would have guessed that you would have chosen.
I mean, I'll tell you kind of a funny story. I was living in a Hare Krishna temple in 1990, and Shelter was doing their first tour with Quicksand and Inside Out, and I knew Inside Out. I mean, I had a copy of I had a tape of their record. I don't even think the record was out yet. I don't remember exactly, and I thought it was a great record. I was living at Hare Krishna temple, But again, I would leave, you know, I would sometimes go home for the weekends because my mother was sick and help with things like that. Anyway, 45 minutes from the temple I lived in, Inside Out, Shelter, and Quicksand were going to play a show. 16 hours away in Tampa, Florida, I had a friend who lived there. His name is Dale. The drummer from Release had called me up and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about going and seeing Dale down in Tampa this weekend, and Prong is playing." I don't know if you know Prong. They were like a kind of like
Snap your finger.
There you go. They're playing 16 hours away. I chose to get in a car, drive 16 hours to Tampa to see Prong open for Flotsam and Jetsam, then see Shelter and Inside Out and Quicksand 45 minutes away.
Yeah, that's
but
dedication.
I liked Inside Out. I mean, I think that EP is fantastic. You know, I did see them live a few times, and I thought they were great. You know, Rage, I just think musically, lyrically, and just in terms of impact, like I don't, I would listen to them before I'd listen to Inside Out.
Yeah, as I said, I still to this day remember vividly standing there, and we were all there for Suicidal Tendencies and for Psycho Michael, and it was one of the first concerts I ever went to. And then there are those four guys coming up on stage, and it was a small club. And after the first 5 seconds, you knew, okay, that is what we're going to listen to for several years now.
Yeah, it was cool. Like I think it was last year, 2 years ago, on my birthday, Rage Against the Machine and Run the Jewels were doing 5 nights in a row in New York City. So, you know, I had done some work with Killer Mike from Run the Jewels. And so, you know, we decided because I love Run the Jewels, like one of my favorite bands.
Very good.
So we decided to go out to New York, and you know, they hooked us up, you know, between, you know, Run the Jewels and Rage, like for tickets for 3 different nights. And I got to tell you, like, you know, even with Zach with the torn Achilles, sitting down the entire time, like my wife, it was funny. My wife went, and she really liked Run the Jewels. She never really paid attention to Rage Against the Machine. She walked away from that, like she'll tell you today, like it was probably one of the best shows she's ever seen. Like him sitting there with a torn Achilles, like just the intensity and the emotion was, I mean, and honestly, it made me kind of reassess like me doing music. Like if you can't come with that sense of urgency and that sense of just like, I need to fucking play tonight, then don't do it ever.
Yeah.
Because that to me was the gold standard. Like watching Run the Jewels every night, like they crushed it, but fucking Rage was, I mean, again, I like them going to the show. Like I like Rage. I don't really listen to them, but I like them. I've seen them live a ton of times. They're always great, but this was a different fucking level.
Yeah, I can understand that. I also have, I don't know how often I've seen them, and they deliver every time. And not just deliver, because deliver is like, okay, it was okay, but they always outperform your expectations.
Yep.
I want to go back to 108 for 1 second, because on a German EP, I think like 30 years ago, you did 2 cover tracks, and I'll give you those 2 bands and you have to choose. Bad Brains versus Black Flag.
Is it in terms of
in general?
Band that I feel closest to, or the band that I feel like is more iconic to and influential?
That you like more?
Black Flag. But if I had to talk about like just the sheer impact and influence, Bad Brains. I mean, and I love fucking Bad Brains. Just Black Flag, Black Flag was my entry point, right? So I think that's the hard part, is that my first exposure to punk was my freshman year of high school, first day of freshman year of high school. I had heard punk music before, but I was a hip hop kid. Like that's what I listened to. And there was a kid in the woodshop class who I had known from years before. We were in sports together. but he was like a complete metalhead, and I was like a hip hop kid. But we talked, and I was, and I was trying to figure out how did you get into this. He's trying to figure out how did you get into that, and I was talking about what I really liked about like hip hop, and particularly I think I was talking about like few Run DMC songs, but also The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And anyway, he was like, I have something you need to listen to. And it was like a cassette tape, and it had like Corrosion and Conformity on it, who I also love, had Dead Kennedys on it. I fucking love them. But the first songs were Black Flag with Ron Reyes, Chavo singing, right? And the first song, right, It's Not My Imagination, There's a Gun at My Back. And that emotion in his voice, that desperation, right then and there, that was it. Like,
You were converted.
So I think that's why I answer Black Flag, because without that, I wouldn't be here. But when I think about like just the catalog of music, the influence, and just how fucking earth-shattering it is, I would have to say Bad Brains.
I think that is a very interesting question, because I think a lot of Europeans would say Black Flag, and I think more Americans would say Bad Brains. So for all you people out there, maybe just leave a comment which one you would choose. For me, it would always be Bad Brains. For me, it would always be Black Flag, because I like also their development, from straight up hardcore punk to more diverse.
But
to me, it would always be Black Flag.
Think about like you listen to the first Bad Brains EP to like Eye Against Eye. I mean, that record's still to me Eye Against Eye. Like something about it is like, I don't know. But anyway, you can't go wrong with the answer there. But again, like I'd say at an emotional level, I'd say Black Flag. But when I think about it, I'm like, oh, Bad Brains. But
as you've just mentioned hip hop, and you being from New York, I of course have to throw in that question. Eric B. and Rakim versus Gangstar.
Eric B. and Rakim, yeah.
Yeah. Although one has to say that nobody has ever beaten the flow that Guru just delivered. That's like,
yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like one of my favorite, and again, I think it goes back to the same thing, like having this sense of like urgency and vision. The one MC that no one really cites that was Run from Run DMC. And again, it wasn't, I mean, I think when you think back to like what people were doing then, he was completely unique. But again, it was that urgency, right? Like, I think that's the thing you'll see. Like, if you hear all the people that I like, the bands or musicians, that is always the common thread. Like his youthful energy, but just also like he had this sense of like desperation and urgency in his voice that I always connected with. And so it's a funny thing. Like, I don't think anybody would say as an MC, right, that he was like in terms of like a lyricist, in terms of flow, wordplay, no. But right, MC, master of ceremonies, like, yo, you can't fuck with Run. Like he was otherworldly.
That's true. Last one, and that is a little bit off the musical side, but as you're living so close to the Mexican border, tacos versus burritos.
Burritos.
Understand. But again, something that you cannot go wrong with, right?
No. And it's cool. There's a place by us. It's like it's called Tacos Veganos. So it's like a vegan Mexican joint. Good God, they make a burrito there that I swear to God, I could eat it every day and be completely satisfied and happy. But I'll go burrito. But you're right. It's hard to go wrong there. Yeah.
Also, something, people, that you cannot go wrong with is just listening to that Unsufferable EP. Literally, I know this is like a step, into hosting hell, like trying to come up with a good ending. But I really like those two songs, and I cannot wait for more to hear. So Rob, take your time, but don't take too long. You got to fill people's needs. So thanks for doing this, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.